For 30 years, I've been telling my patients the same thing every nutritionist and doctor has been saying. Fresh is best. Avoid processed foods. Stay away from canned products. And you know what? I was completely wrong. We were all wrong. I'm about to share something that's going to make you question everything you've been told about healthy eating. Because while we've been spending extra money on fresh produce and premium supplements, the research has been quietly screaming at us that 3 dirt-cheap canned foods could add over a decade to your life. And I'm not talking about a small study here or there. I'm talking about data from over 1 million people, multiple decades of research, and the longest living populations on Earth, all pointing to the same conclusion. A groundbreaking 2022 study in PLOS Medicine analyzed what actually extends human life, and the results shocked the medical community. An optimal diet added 10.7 years for women and 13 years for men. But here's what made headlines. Even starting this diet at age 60 added 8 years. 8 years that could mean the difference between meeting your great-grandchildren or not. And the star players in this longevity diet? 3 canned foods we've been told to avoid. So let me count down the top 3, from number 3 to the absolute most powerful longevity food that's been hiding in plain sight. And I promise you, by the end of this, you'll never look at the canned food aisle the same way again. Number 3. Canned tomatoes. Now here's where it gets wild. For years, we've been told that fresh is always better than canned, that processing destroys nutrients, that canned foods are basically nutritionally dead. Turns out, for tomatoes, the exact opposite is true. When tomatoes are heated during the canning process, the cell walls break down and release lycopene, that powerful red antioxidant that fights cancer and heart disease. A study in the Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry found that cooking tomatoes increases the bioavailability of lycopene by 35%. That means your body absorbs 35% more cancer-fighting compounds from a 99-cent can of tomatoes than from a $5 heirloom tomato at the farmer's market. Let that sink in. A massive study published in the British Journal of Nutrition tracked 25,000 men for 11 years. The men with the highest lycopene levels in their blood had a 55% lower risk of having a stroke. 55%! And the easiest, most concentrated source of lycopene? Canned tomato products. Harvard School of Public Health followed 47,000 men and found that eating tomato products more than twice a week led to a 21 to 34% lower risk of prostate cancer. And here's the kicker. Canned tomato products showed the strongest protective effect because that lycopene is so much more bioavailable. There's also a 2017 study in the European Journal of Epidemiology that found higher lycopene intake was associated with a 14% reduction in stroke risk and a 9% reduction in mortality from all causes. We're talking about a compound that's literally fighting death on multiple fronts. Canned tomatoes are also a cornerstone of the Mediterranean diet, which has been proven over and over to extend life. A landmark 2013 study in the New England Journal of Medicine found that people following a Mediterranean diet had a 30% reduction in heart attacks, strokes, and deaths from cardiovascular disease. And unlike fresh tomatoes that go bad in days, canned tomatoes let you eat this way year-round for pennies. Number 2, canned sardines and fatty fish. Okay, I know sardines aren't winning any popularity contests. For years, I watched patients wrinkle their noses when I suggested them, but after diving deep into the research, I realized these little fish might be the most underrated longevity food on the planet. Harvard Medical School tracked 84,000 women for 16 years in the Nurses' Health Study. Women who ate fish just once a week had a 29% lower risk of coronary heart disease. Those eating fatty fish like sardines 2 to 4 times weekly, 31% reduction. 5 or more times weekly, 34%. The dose-response relationship is crystal clear. More sardines equals less heart disease. A 2021 randomized controlled trial published in Clinical Nutrition took 152 seniors with prediabetes and had them eat just 200 grams of sardines per week. That's 2 small cans. After 1 year, their blood pressure dropped significantly. Their HDL, good cholesterol, went up, their triglycerides went down, and their fasting glucose improved. 2 cans changed their entire metabolic profile. But here's something most doctors don't even know. There's a blood test called the omega-3 index that measures the percentage of omega-3 fatty acids in your red blood cells. Research in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that people with an omega-3 index below 4% had a 90% higher risk of cardiac death compared to those above 8%. Sardines are one of the fastest ways to move from the danger zone to the safe zone. A study published in Atherosclerosis found that eating sardines regularly can shift your omega-3 levels enough to dramatically reduce your coronary heart disease mortality risk. We're talking about a shift from intermediate risk to low risk just from eating these affordable little fish. And it's not just your heart. A 2016 meta-analysis in the Journal of the American Medical Association analyzed 19 studies with over 45,000 participants. Higher omega-3 intake was associated with a 10% lower risk of fatal coronary heart disease. And unlike fish oil supplements, which have shown inconsistent results, whole fish like sardines deliver omega-3s along with vitamin D, calcium, protein, and selenium, all working together. Let's talk about that calcium for a second. Because you eat sardines whole, bones and all, they're absolutely loaded with it. A single 3-ounce can provides about 35% of your daily calcium needs. Plus, sardines are one of the few food sources of vitamin D, which helps you absorb that calcium. A study in the Journal of Bone and Mineral Research found that adequate vitamin D and calcium intake can reduce hip fracture risk by 12% in older adults. A broken hip after 70 often means losing independence. Sardines could literally keep you walking. Number 1, the absolute champion, canned beans and legumes. If I could only recommend one food to every patient over 50 for longevity, this would be it. And the science behind this is so overwhelming, it's actually frustrating that more doctors aren't talking about it. The Food Habits in Later Life study, published in 2004, followed elderly people across Japan, Sweden, Greece, and Australia for 7 years. What they discovered was absolutely stunning. For every 20 grams of legumes people ate per day, that's barely 2 tablespoons, their mortality risk dropped by 8%. But when they calculated the impact on life expectancy, they found that this small daily amount was associated with a 7 to 8 year increase in lifespan. 7 to 8 years from less than a quarter cup of beans a day. Think about what you could do with an extra 7 years. A 2001 study in the Archives of Internal Medicine followed over 9,600 people for 19 years. Those eating beans, peas, or peanuts at least 4 times a week had a 22% lower risk of coronary heart disease compared to those eating them less than once a week. 22% from a food that costs less than $1 a can. In 2023, researchers published a systematic review and meta-analysis in the journal Nutrients that found that for every 50 grams of legumes consumed daily, about a quarter cup, there was a 6% reduction in all-cause mortality. Scale that up, eat a full cup of beans daily, and you're looking at roughly a 24% lower risk of dying during the study period. Those aren't small numbers. That's a massive survival advantage. The Blue Zones research, which identified the 5 regions in the world where people live the longest and healthiest lives, found one dietary pattern present in all 5 zones, approximately 1 cup of beans every single day. In Icaria, Greece, it's chickpeas and lentils. In Sardinia, Italy, it's fava beans. In Okinawa, Japan, it's soybeans and tofu. In Nicoya, Costa Rica, it's black beans and corn. In Loma Linda, California, it's a variety of beans. These populations aren't just living to 80, they're hitting 90, 100, even 110, and they're active, sharp, and independent. A 2014 study in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition found something remarkable. People who eat beans regularly have a 23% lower body weight and a 22% lower obesity rate compared to non-bean eaters, even when consuming similar amounts of calories. Beans keep you satisfied, stabilize blood sugar, and prevent the weight gain that drives so many chronic diseases. And here's one of the most important findings. Chronic inflammation is now recognized as the root cause of aging and disease. High levels of inflammation are linked to heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, arthritis, you name it. A 2016 study found that people eating legumes 4 times per week had a 22% lower level of C-reactive protein, a key inflammation marker, compared to those eating beans less than once weekly. Beans are literally cooling down the inflammatory fire that ages us. Let's talk fiber. 1 cup of beans delivers about 15 grams of fiber. That's half of your daily requirement. A massive study in JAMA Internal Medicine analyzed data from nearly 390,000 people over 9 years. Those with the highest fiber intake had a 16% lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease, a 24% lower risk of dying from infectious diseases, and a 23% lower risk of dying from any cause compared to those with the lowest intake. And beans are one of the most efficient, affordable ways to hit those fiber targets. There's also a 2019 study in Lancet that reviewed data from over 243 studies. High fiber intake was associated with a 15 to 30% decrease in deaths from all causes and from cardiovascular disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and colorectal cancer. The researchers concluded that for every 8-gram increase in dietary fiber per day, total deaths and cases of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and colorectal cancer decreased by 5 to 27%. Beans are also packed with folate, magnesium, potassium, iron, and resistant starch. That resistant starch is a game changer. It passes through your stomach and small intestine undigested and feeds the beneficial bacteria in your colon. A healthy gut microbiome is now linked to everything from immune function to mood regulation to how well you age. A study in Nature Communications found that centenarians, people over 100, have distinctly different gut bacteria compared to younger people, and fiber-rich foods like beans promote those beneficial bacterial strains. There's even research showing beans improve cholesterol. A 2014 Canadian study found that eating 1 serving of legumes daily for 6 weeks lowered LDL, bad cholesterol, by 5%. That might not sound huge, but it's comparable to some statin medications without any side effects. So here's the truth bomb. While we've been chasing expensive superfoods, organic this and grass-fed that, the longest-living people on Earth have been eating cheap canned beans, sardines, and tomatoes. The science isn't subtle, it's screaming at us. Here's your action plan, and I want you to start today, not someday. Go to your grocery store and buy these 3 things: canned beans, any variety you like, canned sardines or salmon, and canned tomatoes, whole or crushed. This week, add beans to at least 4 meals. Toss them in salads, soups, tacos, or mash them into dips. Eat sardines or canned salmon twice this week. Put them on toast, mix them with pasta, add them to a salad. Use canned tomatoes as your base for sauces or soups instead of cream or butter. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to overhaul your entire diet. You just need to add these 3 foods consistently. The research is overwhelmingly clear. Millions of study participants, decades of data, the world's longest living populations, they're all telling us the same thing. These 3 simple, affordable canned foods could add a decade of healthy, active life. That's 10 more years of travel, 10 more years with family, 10 more years of doing what you love. And it's not hiding in some exotic berry from the Amazon or a $1,000 supplement protocol. It's sitting on a shelf in aisle 5. We were wrong about canned food. The question is, are you going to keep following outdated advice, or are you going to follow the science? Start with 1 can this week. Your future self will thank you.